In this video, I'll try to explain why I don't believe the block universe model is the only plausible model, and why I'm convinced the evolving universe model is still valid. The evolving universe is the natural model, the one we all instinctively perceive, that of a universe in motion where the future doesn't yet exist. Before we begin, if you have no idea what block universe model is, I suggest you watching one of these two videos where the topic is well explained by Sabine Hossenfelder, who doesn't need any presentation. Just a few words, introducing words about block universe. According to the block universe model, the universe has to be considered like a frozen river, and consequently the flow of time is a mere illusion. Physicists say that all is fixed, or even all is now. The view that everything is fixed seems unassailable, unfalsifiable. All we need to do is apply to the future what we already do with the past. This view could be supported even before the discovery of special relativity, when space and time were considered absolute, but it was with special relativity that it seems to be the only plausible model, to the detriment of the image of an evolving universe in which the future does not yet exist. My aim is to try to show that the model of the evolving universe is still plausible, despite what most physicists now believe. This is what we might call the natural model, the one we instinctively perceive as consistent with our direct experience of both the external and internal worlds. Let's see why physicists believe that the block universe is the only possible model as a consequence of special relativity, referring to the classical example used. There are two causally connected events, E1 and E2, and the third event, E, not causally connected to both E1 and E2. In practice, there exists a reference system A for which E is simultaneous with E1, and another B for which E is simultaneous with E2. Let's call O sub A any observer of reference system A, and O sub B any observer of reference system B. What do block universe proponents say? For O sub A, the event E is simultaneous with the event E1, so when he considers E now, he also considers E1 now. For O sub B, the event E is simultaneous with the event E2, so when he considers E now, he also considers E2 now. O sub A is right in believing that the events E and E1 exist now, but then, by the equivalence of all observers, O sub B is also right in believing that E and E2 exist now. Then E, E1, and E2 are now or fixed. Since this reasoning can be applied to any pair of causally connected events, then the conclusion is that everything is now or fixed. What do they mean saying that any observer is right when he considers that two events not causally connected are now? We know from special relativity that some properties are relative, as the temporal interval and the spatial interval between two events. They depend on the reference system, and others are absolute, so independent of the reference system. Examples of these are the time-space interval between two events, the laws of nature, like, for example, the speed of light, which is constant, which is c, and to be causally connected or not causally connected for two events. The temporal relation between two not causally connected events is relative. It exists only one reference system for which they are now, infinite reference system which consider event 1 preceding event 2, and infinite reference system which consider event 1 following event 2. For such events, their absolute temporal relation is that they are not causally connected, but in terms of absolute precise temporal relation, i.e. now, before or after, they do not have one. It is indeterminate. But block universe model proponents, supporters say that any observer is right about his now. So what they mean by saying this? It means that the now of an observer is true, is real, so it's relative. It's not absolute in the sense of independent of the observer, but it's real. Real means that it's true not only for one reference system, but in a general way or in an absolute way, but not the absolute way we have just talked about. And this type of real is simply block universe model. Don't you agree with me? Look at this diagram. Starting from event E, if observers are right about their now, then all events in the gray regions exist. together with event E. And applying this same reasoning to any event in those regions, we conclude that all events of the universe exist. All is fixed. But if we think just a little more about this, it means that within the paradigm of special relativity, saying that any observer is right about his now is equivalent to say that all is fixed or all exists. They are two different ways to express the same concept. It's a tautology. What most physicists consider to be evidence that the block universe model is the only valid one is simply choice. They choose to attribute reality to something relative, going beyond what special relativity tells us. The now of a reference system is surely objective. We know exactly what it means operatively, but attributing a reality to it means elevating it to something intrinsic, independent of the reference system, and this is at least arbitrary, since it does not have an absolute character according to special relativity. Any model that intends to describe the universe must provide an absolute image of it. It must therefore be based only on absolute properties, that is, properties that are independent of the reference system. If we consider the universe as made up of elementary particles that interact with each other, in which only the causal relations between events count, its evolution is the same for all observers. Certainly, the temporal and spatial intervals between events vary depending on the reference system, but this is insignificant with respect to its dynamics, to how it evolves. Just think, for example, of a football match observed from different reference systems. It would always be the same match for all observers, since it depends solely on its causally connected events. What about events that are not causally connected? Is it physically significant that for one observer they are simultaneous while for another they are not? Still using the example of a soccer match, consider the case of a penalty kick in which the penalty taker and the goalkeeper decide in advance, as often happens, where the former will kick the ball and the latter will dive. What significance does it have whether the two events, the kick and the goalkeeper's dive, are observed as simultaneous or not? In any case, the two players' choices do not depend on what the other does, because they are not causally connected. This is the essence of their temporal relation. Doesn't the future yet exist in the model of the evolving universe? The future is what comes after the present, but as we have already seen, we can't refer to the present of the universe because it isn't absolute or intrinsically real. Instead, we can ask this question: what is the future shared by all reference systems with respect to a single event? In other words, when all reference systems consider an event now, what are the events that haven't happened yet for all of them? All events in the region F of this diagram are causally connected to event E. Any observer would say when event E happens, no events in that region has already happened. They have yet to happen. Region F is the intersection between all futures for all observers when they consider E now. This means it's an absolute future region. So, returning to the example of the football match for a moment, the event E could be the referee initial whistle, while an event in its absolute future, the scoreboard with the final result. How is the future region filled? There is no absolute way to represent or imagine it, but certainly you can choose any inertial reference frame, since they are all equivalent in describing the dynamic of the system, since it's based on causally connected events. And at the end, just one final consideration. I would have no doubts about the block universe model as the only possible model if the temporal dimension were interchangeable with any spatial dimension in the laws of nature. But this is not the case.